I'll give a quick introduction. So I think everybody can hear us now, whoever's on. I'm here with Ben, who's going to be presenting today, and he's got a really, really good topic. Hope you all had a really nice Easter. A bit of a strange one. Usually with weather like we've had, we'd be on the beach the entire weekend, but we were stuck in our homes and gardens with maybe a walk a day if we can get away with it. The sun has been shining all weekend where we are. I don't know about everybody else, but it's been a real welcome boost. Anyway, I am going to pass over to Ben. Anyone who was on the webinar last week will remember Ben, who helped me out with the Q&A. Ben's going to give himself a bit of an introduction because he can do it far better than I can. And then he's going to launch into his topic, which promises to be really interesting. I've had a sneak preview of the slides. It's great. It's really good stuff. Really good content. So hopefully you can all see the chat window. If you can't, I do apologize. I'm still learning how to use this software myself, but hopefully it's there and it's fairly obvious. There's a little window on the right hand side with the chat. So please do chat. Let us know you're here. Let us know that you can hear us. While Ben's presenting, I'll keep an eye on the chat, and then hopefully at the end we'll have a good number of questions that we can run through and answer, get a bit of dialogue going and a bit of conversation going. So with that, I'll hand over to Ben. All yours, Ben.
Well, good morning all, and thank you very much for finding the time to join me in a sunny Hatherley today. And as with Simon, I hope you've had a really good weekend. Okay, so just to tell you, good morning, Nikki. I've just seen your message there. Good to hear from you. So a bit about me. My name is Ben Wotherway. I run a consultancy called The Value Engine, and we have two services. One is a marketing service and the other is an innovation service. And I was talking to Simon about this session, and Simon asked me if I could pull something together on creating value in a crisis. So I've pulled some content together. I'll share that with you. As always with these things, we'll have a Q&A at the end, so there'll be plenty of opportunity to ask questions. Okay, so without further ado, firstly, where are we heading? Well, we're firstly going to ask the question, what is value? We're then going to do some work and we're going to think about history. At the moment, we're going through an unprecedented time, but there have been recessions before. So we're going to think a bit about what is going on. And once we understand that background, we'll talk about how you as marketeers can formulate a strategic response, which has credibility. And we'll look at how you can create value in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. Okay, well, it's always good to have a quote. So Barack Obama, president before the current one, for the world has changed and we must change with it. And I don't think any of us would argue that the world hasn't changed. It's changed phenomenally in an incredibly short period of time. And I think for all of us in business, our priorities change. So, what is value? It's one of those words which is probably overused. And we talk about company values and personal values, but I have a very specific meaning for this presentation when I talk about what is value. So for me, it's value in the eyes of the customers. So products and services which solve customers' problems. And as they solve those problems, they create value for the customers for which they will pay. And that enables the supplying company to generate revenue and profits for their business. Now, I've put a note underneath there because, of course, we could all create value for people. But if that value costs more to create than it is than people are prepared to pay, it's not value in the eyes of the business. So therefore, that value needs to be created at a cost which is less than the customers are paying. So that leads us on to two ways by which we may create value. We could either increase the customer value, and therefore we're prepared to pay more for the product or service, or we can reduce the cost to create that customer value. So we've spoken about what value is. Let's just go back a bit and let's talk about the wider picture. Well, we've had recessions before, and there is a pattern about what happens. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a bit about what is happening in your organization now. And there's always a marketing view, and there's a finance and operational view. And those two need to be balanced. And as marketers, it's really important that we're aware of those points. So we'll talk through that. Okay, so I hope you can see that slide. That is a graph of economic growth in the US over the last 100 years. And you can see that it goes upwards. The GDP goes upwards. But there's points where it falters and it goes backwards. And I've taken a cutout of what happened in probably the biggest recession, which of course was the Great Depression after the 1929 stock crash. And you can see economic growth went negative, but of course afterwards it grew strongly, and that's what normally happens. All the data tells us that companies which invest in recession have better results after the recession. However, that's all very well, but when you're in business at that time, it doesn't feel like that in the moment. So I've done a bit of research and I've tried to give some sense of what is happening today. So a situation like this comes along, and the first reaction is rapid reaction and defense. And I think it's fair to say that in the current recession, that's been bigger than ever because we've had to shut down our business, we've had to furlough staff. It's a new world. Then people think, okay, this is big. How am I going to get through it? How are we going to endure this? Once those plans have been made and it's underway, companies start to think, okay, we will come out the other side. How are we going to prepare for that rebound? And after that, the businesses will think about how do we reinvent ourselves for the future. And you can see below that I've put short term, medium term, and long term. And we'll talk about how you create value and be credible in each of those areas. Okay. So I've put this slide up there because I wanted to address this challenge which has to be balanced. So at one point I've said, it's a good time to invest in your business. We know that if we look at, for example, Google, that competition for ads is down, so that your share will be up. We know that customers are still engaging and they're at home and they have more time to listen. You as marketeers want to build for the long term and you want to be ready for that rebound. So you've got your invest for the long-term view. There's also a finance view, which is we need to survive this situation, and therefore cash is king. I think it's fair to say almost in every business, there's a tightening on spend. Do you really need to do it? There's also that focus, particularly at the moment, on maintaining critical operations. And let's be honest, your long-term marketing plan is a long-term plan. It's not critical to today, but there is a realization that the rebound needs to be prepared for. And while it's very important as marketers, we champion the argument to invest in our brands, we must really be aware of this pressing condition, because if businesses do not manage their cash, they will not be around for the long term. So I've got a bit of an example here. I worked for Land Rover at the time of the last recession. And in 2008, we launched a fantastic new concept called the LRX, and it was groundbreaking. It was launched in 2011, And to be honest, the business then was so strapped for cash. We were literally going around finding any cars which were on the fleet and selling them. It was so strapped for cash. And yet, the company rightly chose to invest in this new product, in the marketing, in the development, and in the tooling. It was launched in 2011 and was one of the most successful products. There were 18,000 pre-orders. It was priced at a very premium level, about 40k for a small car. It was expensive. And it delivered 90,000 sales in 2012. And the investment in the recession in that product was pivotal to the growth in the future. However, there were other things which we cut. So one of the big marketing activities was something called the G4 Challenge. And this was a global adventure competition in 4 different continents with mountain biking, kayaking, and off-road driving, all that type of thing. And it was being run for the 2nd time. And it was a very successful campaign. However, it was decided it was not critical for current operations. The product development was, and therefore it was cut. And I believe history shows that that was the right choice. And as you can see there, the business had to choose what you're going to back and what you're going to cut. And that is what we need to do. Next slide. So, coming back to our topic of how do we create more value. So in the short term, I'm going to talk about focused activity. In the medium term, I'm going to talk about compelling messaging. And in the long term, we'll talk about smarter offerings. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that almost all of you, not everyone, will have been asked to cut your budget, to spend smartly. There will be some of you who are in sectors which are unaffected. And if that's you, enjoy it. Enjoy it. It's a good place to be. So you're going to have to ask questions of your budget because you will need to reduce your budget. And if you sit there saying to your MD or your CEO, we need to invest in our brand long term, he will agree, but he will say, and I've got a wage bill to pay at the end of the month. So therefore, budgets, you will have that challenge. So therefore, you need to be really smart about what you're going to stop. Are there areas to increase investment? So again, let's take another real world example. In the US, an FMCG brand was sponsoring one of the big American football teams. This activity was really popular with distributors, but it didn't do that much for the brand in the customer's eyes. So they pulled it. There were no negative impacts. So you need to go through your budgets and think, is there anything nice to have which we can stop? But there also may be areas where you need to increase investment. I've mentioned PPC. We know that you can get better results for less money at the moment because so many brands have stopped their advertising that there is less competition. So there may be an opportunity. One of the changes we've had is this type of webinar and using Zoom for meetings has become normal. There's a load of customers who 6 months ago would have wanted a face-to-face meeting, and now they've become familiar with Zoom. So there may be opportunities for you to invest to create brilliant assets for your sales teams for those Zoom calls. There are smart low-cost solutions. We know that in this crisis, the consumption of video has dramatically increased. Could you do more there? And again, the data says we have more people searching, engagement remains strong, but conversion is down. So it's absolutely critical you really understand your long-term journey. So what is your COVID-19 lead nurturing journey? How are you going to find out who is interested now, engage with them, because in 6 months they may be ready to buy. And of course, your messaging needs to reflect the current reality. And I'd recommend that you emphasize your core values. So you can see your value creation for the short term is 2 things. One, it's reducing cost to increase profitability. And 2, it's taking advantage of the change to reprioritize your marketing budget. However, while the short term is good, that is not a long-term strategic plan. And what I'm recommending to you is that you have your short-term plan, your medium-term plan, and possibly even your long-term plan. And as you share that with your business, that will give a really coherent and strategic response to the current crisis. So you can see I have 3 people. I think it's fair to say that I could not achieve the haircut on the left. And the reality is your customers are different. There are some customers, let's take retirees on final salary pensions, who are unaffected by this crisis. You can very much go after those guys. They'll be happy to spend. If you're in a B2B environment and you're selling to a supermarket, they're a good segment. My point is that you will have different segments within your market. If you're a small business, you may have one segment, but most companies will have different segments. It's important you know what those segments are and you understand them. Okay, so how do you create those segments? So you could do them by industry sector. Again, supermarkets are booming, pubs are crashing. Those 2 different customer groups will have different priorities. You may do it by geography, maybe by demographic, or by behavior and psychology, or by spend level. One thing I would mention is that how you do segmentation for B2B, business to business, is different from B2C, business to consumer. But the important things you need to ask is, are my segments clear, and are they differentiated, and are they large enough to be worth bothering with? If there are 4 customers in your segment who each have 4 pence to spend, I recommend you don't waste time on it. If there's 400 customers, each with 400k to spend, then I put a lot of time in it. So what I've said here is you need to understand your segments and you need to create those. And I've given some guidance then on how you consider your segments. Now, of course, you need to do something with that. And this is the inside bit. So my argument here is that your customer's world has changed, and therefore their perception of value has also changed. So on the left-hand side, I've given a methodology for considering this. So you can see there's 3 things on the insights part. There's customer jobs, there's customer gains, and there's customer pains. Now, in terms of jobs, there are 3 types of different jobs. There are functional, there are emotional jobs, and there are social jobs. So let's say I want to look smart and I want to buy a new jacket. Fine. I am buying that to keep warm. I'm buying that to look smart. But there's an emotional side. Maybe I buy my jacket and I feel $1 million when I'm wearing my new sparkly jacket. So I feel great. It's an emotional job. Maybe I want to impress my friends at how hip I am. For those who know me in reality, you know that would never, ever happen. And therefore, there's a social job. And there's gains. I feel great. I look smart. I get recognition. And there's pains. It costs me money. I have to travel to buy my jacket. It might not fit right. So what I recommend is you analyze your segments. You think about those jobs. You think about those pains and those gains. The best way to do this is with your sales team, because this approach gives you a language by which to understand the insights. So the closest one is to the customer, talk to them. If you could talk to the customer yourself and validate it, even better. And you need to prioritize ones. Which jobs are really really important. Because there'll be some jobs, they're not that relevant, they're not that important. So prioritize them and consider what has changed. By following this approach, you will have insights for each of your segments. Once you have insights, you then can consider how your offering can serve those insights. So this methodology was created by a guy called Alex Osterwalder in Switzerland, and I find it a fantastic tool for understanding your market. So you've looked at your customer jobs, you understand their gains and their pains, and then you can look at how your offer matches to those. Are there new jobs or gains and pains which you can address? You know which are the most important jobs, which are the most important gains and pains. So can you address them? Could you tweak your offering to address them? So as the customer goes through the prices, you understand how their world has changed and your messaging can change to reflect that. So you've got your insights, you understand how you can serve them. You can then take the insight for each segment. And again, there's a lot of tools on how to do this. I use tools such as the brand key to formulate your rational and emotional messages to drive action. So, for example, we know that spend is going to be massively looked at. So I'm going to go back to my automotive days. When we were in Land Rover, as the recession came, we changed our messaging for Why Buy Discovery. It was, I want this luxury cool SUV, to I need a vehicle with 7 seats with all this different capability. So we pushed on the rational. You could create tools such as cost-saving calculators to show those benefits. Couple of points. Keep it simple and relevant. Showing empathy is key. This reflects on what Simon spoke about last week. Be part of the army. What I mean by that is be part of the solution. There are businesses in Southwest, I've seen some manufacturing companies, some of the gin companies, who are actually really solving these problems by producing products. But there's stuff you've done to be part of the solution. If you're manufacturing in the UK, if you're helping the UK economy get back on its feet, talk about that message. Demonstrate the value tangibly. Spend is going to be watched. Therefore, it's absolutely important you find smart ways. This again, we're talking about your sales teams on Zoom calls. Could you have some really cool, really simple tool they could put in to demonstrate the value of the product and at all times protect your brand? Okay, so let's just recap on the journey. We started off with saying what is value. We looked at the economic situation. We've spoken about the short term, which is about smart spend, saving costs, but being smart. We've spoken about the medium term, which is understanding your different customer segments and your insights and making sure your messaging is right. Let's talk about the long term. So the world has changed. And once we get past the initial endure the recession, thoughts will move towards how can we be ready for the upswing, but also how can you reinvent your business for the long term. So I've got a couple of things to share on the long term. So of course, new trends create new opportunities, and how could you maximize your the opportunity for your business based upon those trends? There are processes, there are methodologies, and again, using those is core to what we do here at the Value Engine. So there's loads of trends. I've just picked a few. Now, my gran is using Zoom. This is an amazing thing. She's 94. There's a new generation of consumers who are embracing digital. What people are doing in their spare time has changed. I've ordered a new fork, I've ordered a new trowel, I've bent all the other ones because our soil is so hard. But home activities, DIY, sewing, those type of things. Trust becomes all important. When times are tough, we go to what we know. Budgets get tighter. your spend will be looked at. All of us in our own households. Previously, we might have just bought it. Now we think about it. Home working is becoming the new normal, and that will stay. Again, digital demos, digital meetings, the whole digital area is becoming commonplace. I believe that trend will stick. It's really interesting. So I did some research and I looked at a couple of comments on trends which are stuck in China, and a couple of them are things like online baking demos, online exercise courses. So again, going back to my point on video, there's stuff you can do cheaply and quickly. Think about doing that. So moving back to how create new offerings. Well, the first thing is don't start with the technology, start with the customer. Are there customer jobs which need to be satisfied? That's your insight. So, and then again, is there a blueprint that you could do this at a profit? That's your new technology. And how much change is required to do this? And does it make sense? So I'm going to use a real life example, which I learned about from Simon. Simon recognized that customers wanted scratch and sniff cards. I apologize, that's my 4-year-old in the background. I was meant to go above the garage, the internet connection is not fast enough. Customers wanted scratch and sniff cards, but actually the cost to do this was really, really high. So Simon and the team looked, they found a way to do that profitably. They thought, how can we change our organization? So they worked on things like the SEO for scratch and sniff. They now have a new line to their business, which I haven't looked into the numbers, but I imagine gives good margins because it's differentiated. So we sometimes think as innovation is something out there. Actually, it's happening with people on this call. So need a customer job, need a way to do it profitably, and your organization has to consider whether you can change enough to take opportunity of that. Okay, so that's all fine. So you've done your insight work with your jobs, pains and gains. Then how you do this? So you need to map today, and there's lots of tools and techniques which I'm very happy to share with people. Then you need to imagine what tomorrow could be based on those customer insights. Then there'll be a load of assumptions behind that. If people can buy scratch and sniff cards for £4.99, they will buy them. Okay, that's an assumption. How do you prove it or disprove it? And then if you do that, you have a validated offer. And again, there are processes that you can do this with a structured approach with clear metrics. And many of my greatest successes have actually come where you look at the 3 areas of innovation: business model innovation, product and service, and digital. So I'm just going to unpack that for a bit with an example. So take ourselves back to 2003. Before we had iPhones, there was a company called Apple, and they introduced the iPod. Now, okay, there is some products and service innovation there, but there are companies who produce smart, stylish, good MP3 players before Apple. But Apple glued their MP3 player together with their iTunes to give you an ecosystem of services. And that was, and then they went for a product innovation to a business model innovation. They had revenue streams from the device and revenue streams from the music. And of course, once you bought an iPod, you were going to stay with Apple because all your music was on iTunes. Of course, this was supported by a degree of digital innovation. And when you get those 3 coming together, that is the time you achieve massive growth. Now, I think, going back to our previous slide, not every company will be ready for that. A lot of companies, it'll be really good to do some innovation, which takes something, takes the customer insight, and moves it to the next level. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a really good approach. And to be honest, doing what Apple did is pretty brave and pretty big. When they launched some of that technology, their revenues actually just gone down by 33%. So I'm sure there were some nervous times at that point. Okay. So let's recap. We started off by saying, what is value? And value was benefits for which the customer is prepared to pay for, which you as a business can profitably serve. We looked at past recessions. We said, what's going on? And we saw the journey your organization is going through, and how you as a marketeer can balance the desire to invest for the long term, but be absolutely understanding the business essentials of cash flow and the finances. And we saw that you could create a strategic response by having a plan for short-term and medium-term value creation. The long term you should consider, it's a big conversation, but it's a good thing to have. We then looked at what short-term value creation was, how you could reduce your spend, but get smarter, investing in key areas. For medium-term value creation, we spoke about understanding your segments and what really motivates them and what has changed. And long-term value creation, we scratched the surface. It's a big topic of how you could reinvent your business to create new revenue streams to deliver increased profitability. Well, look, thank you very much for listening. I hope you found that useful. It's time for Q&A now, but thank you.
Great, thanks, Ben. That's really interesting. And I know we discussed this at length last week. Can you share one of your sort of life case studies from your previous company, or are you not allowed to share that one?
I'm sure I can. So I am actually still, but I work with a company called Bot, which is a leading manufacturer of workplace storage and in-vehicle equipment. The company was incredibly successful at selling to fleets. It had a culture of excellent service and good products, and it was really innovative at listening to its customers and going to the next stage. And we were doing really well at selling vehicle equipment to fleets. But we knew that we weren't selling enough to plumbers, to electricians, to small tradespeople. So we did some work and we understood several things. Number one, these guys are really busy. With fleets, it's a long journey where you understand the customer's needs and you develop a solution and they place the order. These guys needed a really quick way to develop their solution. The product was too expensive because by the time you'd taken that design time, the cost to fit the product, it cost too much. And the third one was they were happy to fit it themselves. So there are three insights. One about the way they bought the equipment, it needed to be really quick. The other was about the cost, it needed to be lower. And the other was about the fitting. They were happy to fit it themselves. So we looked at that business model. We said, how can we creatively solve this? And how can we use technology to make that work better? So we developed a system where customers could design their solution online. We developed a equipment which could be fitted like an IKEA kit. Very, 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 very simple. And we launched this online. And to be honest, it was a journey. There were tough points and there are good points. But that business is now hugely successful, is growing exponentially, and it's something I'm very, very proud of. And that was using those innovation processes.
Awesome. And I think that example there, it really sort of hits home the point that you don't necessarily need to start a new business to start a new revenue stream, because basically what you did was you took an existing product and a new market, and you made a few tweaks to the product itself and a few tweaks to the distribution channel, i.e. you sold it online rather than traditional, face to face or whatever, and you automatically came up with a new revenue stream. And I think that's a really awesome example of how not exactly easy, but how simple it can be to innovate and create new value, new revenue streams in your company.
And what I would say, Simon, is people often think these things are a crystal ball. And there's been some great work done over the last few years, particularly by guys like Alex Osterwalder, on how to go to a scalable process. So how can you do this and reduce the risk? And actually, as a business, you need to have a portfolio of stuff you're going to do a bit better, and those one or two standout things. Because launching things like Smart Van is great, and it's a really, really good thing. But it needs to be balanced with your core business, because if you only do stuff like that, you are slightly betting the house. So you need a balance of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess the other thing that you had to make sure is that you didn't distract your teams from your core business, which was the fleet vans.
Of course, and I would say, whenever you do stuff like this, particularly if you disrupt a market, uh, some of the way your cultural norms are slightly different from the traditional business, and there's been a lot of good thinking about that. But it's so important you respect everything they bring and do as much as you can to explain the journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't see. Let me see. Oh, there is one question coming from Kerry England. Hello, Kerry. She says, if you could pick just one short-term activity, which one would you invest in?
Good question, Kerry. Uh, a question back to you. Which sector are you in? If you can answer that, that will help.
I think she's in the works for a solicitor firm. Kerry, is that?
Okay, fine. If
Yeah.
if I were in your situation for a short-term activity, it's really hard to connect with your clients face to face. So I would be looking to think, how can I use tools such as video to engage those clients? And in terms of content, I'd be looking what content could be helpful to them at the moment. So you're in a virtual world. How can you do that? And you may find by doing that, you can create new models to deliver your service online. So there's a company in Plymouth called Portcullis Legal, which are a really innovative company run by a guy called Trevor Worth, and they've done an awful lot of work on delivering their service online, which is working now. But they may find after this situation that enables them to actually disrupt their market by delivering a great service at a lower cost, because there's not people driving around in cars, which of course costs money.
Yeah, that's really well explained, Ben. And I think, like you said, if you can find new revenue streams or new channels to communicate with your customer that you can continue when things are back to normal, even if it's on a sort of reduced scale, then I think it would be. I think those are the things that you should focus on and concentrate on. So, like you said, things like webinars, things like video, so that you can then become a knowledge base and you can increase trust. Because a lot of these people, particularly customers of solicitors and lawyers, they're looking for reassurance, and they're looking for the reassurance that your brand knows what it's on about. So if you can use this time to cement that home, I think that'd be really, really valuable.
I would certainly say so. If you look at your insight piece, your customers will have become more comfortable with digital technology, and in terms of how you serve them, uh, they may see a gain in that. But for you as a business, you could reduce the cost of delivering your service by fully embracing that. One thing I would say is, so there's a concept of the minimum viable product for testing new ideas. And so think about, okay, we've got this idea. What are the assumptions behind it? What is the simplest and quickest way to test it? So you could say, right, are people interested? What we're going to do is we're just going to mock up a web page. We're going to do some Google ads, and we're just going to see if anyone clicks. We're just going to see what happens. So rather than doing all the development work and launching it, do some really quick tests, and they will give you evidence whether you're barking up the wrong tree, or actually if you got a winner.
Great stuff, Ben. Next question's from Christian Welburn. I don't know if you can read it, Ben. I'll read it out quickly. You mentioned the grey pound. Considering your sensitivity around essential products at the moment, would you have any advice when looking to advertise leisure products to them delivered direct to door? So I'm guessing by grey pound, he means the sort of older category. And I'm also assuming B2C rather than B2B.
I wouldn't say there's any particular issue with advertising leisure products at the moment. I think the only thing you need to be careful is if you're advertising a product which encourages you to do things which don't fit in with the social distancing regime, you just need to be smart there. What I would say, there's no problem advertising it, gaining their interest, but you wouldn't want to be encouraging people to break the rules on things. But no, I think advertising with them is fine. I think people expect to be advertised to. Just do it respectfully.
Yeah, and I also think that you might need to find some tweaks to your business model. So, for example, if you're in retail, look at the feasibility of home deliveries. I know lots and lots of companies have done this. I mean, you look at restaurants and pubs, for example. Pretty soon after the lockdown was announced, I know a few guys in the packaging sector, and they were absolutely flat out processing orders for home delivery boxes, because these pubs and restaurants, they were converting their existing kitchens into fast food delivery and online order delivery, and they were adapting really, really quickly. And I think that that may be something you need to look at. But as to the sensitivity around essential products, there is a sensitivity, and there is sensitivity for a reason. As Ben said, if you're able to prove that you're not promoting anything that endangers the social distancing regulations and endangers people's lives by encouraging them to come into stores, then I'd focus on that. Any more to say on that, Ben?
No, just one thing, picking up on how businesses have innovated with the current situation. One thing I would say is, so when we're doing our day-to-day business, it's all about delivering everything perfectly, because that's what the customer wants. Now that's fine, but when you're doing new stuff, you won't deliver perfectly. I know when we did Smart Van, we always absolutely satisfy the customer's criteria. But now the on-time delivery and things is perfect. It's really good. But it was a journey as we developed it. If you have an idea, think, how is the simplest way we can do that? So Darts Farm, for example, they saw there's an opportunity for home delivery in this tough time. Initially, they didn't have any infrastructure to do that, so they just got a web page up there, and they found a really smart way customers could collect from the store without any personal contact. So just think, what is the simplest way we can test this model, and test it and break it, and in breaking it, you'll learn stuff.
Yeah, production before perfection.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Christian, I hope that's been helpful. Happy to get in touch afterwards if you want to bounce any ideas around. Ben, question here from Kim Parry. How do you start writing a marketing strategy for 2021? Really good question.
Okay, so firstly, start with your segments. Understand your different segments. You may have several segments, or you may just have one. What are their pains and gains? And then I'd say, you need to look at how you're going to reach them, how you're going to acquire them, how are you going to convert them, and how are you going to engage them for the long term. So depending on your segment, you're going to have different tools. That, like trade shows, trade shows by 2021 should be up and running. But if I'm writing it now, that's not there. But you need to have really clear actions. And then in terms of your content marketing, think about whether you have content which suits all those different things. So there'll be content when they're just kind of looking, if I have an interesting video on LinkedIn, to get them in the door. There'll be other content when they're moving towards the buying stage, which gives them real detail and they can engage with. So I think, segments, customer needs, and clear actions on your reach, acquire, convert, and engage. That will be the way I'll start to approach it.
Yeah, that's great. And also, I think it's a good idea to build in at least 2 different scenarios, maybe 3. So if this happens, then we do this, or if lockdown is extended by 3 months, we do this. Like Ben said, different channels, you might be able to go to trade shows next year, but you might not. So if you can't, what do you do then? And if you build in different scenarios like that, I think you'll be in a really good position, because the whole point of a strategy is that it's rigid enough to be clear and that everyone can follow it, but also flexible enough that you can tweak it as the year goes on and make adjustments to it, answer to respond to changing needs and a changing environment. So I'd build in a couple of different scenarios at least, and also think about how communication channels are going to change after this crisis. It's really interesting when we look back at the global financial crisis back in 2008, 2009. We noticed a massive surge back towards more traditional media because there'd been so much online. People literally had digital fatigue. So we found that a lot of people were turning back to print, back to direct mail instead of email, instead of social advertising, because people were finding that they were literally getting too much information online, and they were starting to switch off it. And I've actually started to see that already, where people are saying, I'm not logging into Facebook more than once a day. I'm not looking at the news more than once a day. I'm not turning on the TV news. And you need to think about how the channels might be changing after when we return to whatever normal there is.
Simon, I think that's a good point. I think the other thing you need to be really clear on, what are your metrics for success? So all those, your reach, acquire, your convert, and engage. It's really important you have metrics and you know what success is, and also you know the return on investment of your different channels. I appreciate sometimes that's hard to measure. So for example, if you're looking at your last click in an online module for revenue attribution, social media always does really, really badly. But try to understand what your targets are and what your metrics are to measure them.
Yeah, that's great. Looks like that's all the questions. Let me just double check. Any? No, I think that is all. Ben, I did just have one question for you. You mentioned the short term, medium term, and long term. Would you recommend that you work on all of those during this time? And if so, what sort of proportion for each?
Okay, so I would probably put a good 40% of my effort on the short term. I would probably put the other 40% on the medium term. The long term I consider, but that has to be the whole organization. Engage with that. So on that one, if you want to explore that, it's finding the right time to share that stuff with your organization and start to think about how you can do that. I haven't given in this webinar any kind of I've just said there's something out there, but haven't told people how, and I'm very happy to do that if people want to get in contact. So you need to bear that in mind, but you need to be smart because you can get caught in a whirlwind of confusion with that. So most of your energy on the short and the medium term, but your organization does need to think about the long term. But it is a long-term, ongoing subject.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ben. And I would strongly recommend that anyone who's interested get in touch with Ben. He's a fountain of information, and he's got a really, really good business model there that he's able to help you find these new revenue streams and new value sources. So get in touch with Ben. Thanks for joining again. I realise it's 2 weeks since the last one, which I think is probably a bit long. So I'm going to try and get another webinar organised for end of next week. So please, if you have any requests or any ideas of topics and any advice, any practical advice, any strategic advice that you'd like to see in these webinars, then just hit me up, give me a call, drop me an email, drop me a LinkedIn message, and we'll see what we can do to answer the questions. So thanks, Ben.
And thank you for having me.
No problem. And we'll see you soon.
All the best,
Have a
guys.
good day.
Cheers.
Keep safe.
Bye. Bye.